You don't know true pain or suffering until you've seen Thomas the Tank Engine making out with Twilight Sparkle.
Tigger impregnant.
I'm not ready to be a dad.
You steal my cookies, bad cat!
I want the cookies.
So what is fandom? Well, fandom is a subculture composed of fans categorized by a feeling of empathy and camaraderie with others, who share a common interest. With the advancements of the internet and social media over the past 5 or 10 years, it has become a lot easier for like-minded people to find each other. Of course, being a fan of something and sharing that passion with other fans is not, in and of itself, a bad thing. But I'm sure that everyone watching this video knows where I'm going with this. Yes, not every individual fan of something is good, ranging from weird but ultimately harmless to unhealthy obsession. That could cause that individual to be a harm to themselves or others. Oh, and trigger warning, this video is going to go into some of the darker aspects of fandom culture. Go ahead and hit the dislike button and post your angry rant in the comments section before even hearing me out. That and the inevitable first comment. Now let's talk about Sonic. Sonic the Hedgehog, classic Sega Genesis character. People often wonder how and why the Sonic fanbase has a reputation of containing people with such bizarre desires to see their characters giant or inflated or shrunken down or gender swapped or wearing diapers or any number of weird things. It could be a combination of a lot of different factors. Perhaps Sonic the Hedgehog's fanbase is just so widespread that there would just be some natural crossover with some particularly uncommon niche groups of the internet. Perhaps it is just a vocal minority. Perhaps there are people on the internet that have become so desensitized to what is normal that they need to find increasingly weirder things in their life to find enjoyment. Now personally, I'm not the type to judge people who have a specific kink or fetish or hobby, as long as it is between two consenting adults and you're not hurting anyone. That won't stop other people from being judgmental, but I personally am not going to go out of my way to make these people's lives more difficult. And I don't condone or champion any of the trolls that do so. I do not think I am better or worse than anyone here, and make no such claim in this video. However, there is no denying that every fandom has its bad apples. The dark side of fandoms, if you will. And there is no denying that there is a morbid interest in the cringe that comes from fandom. A few years ago I made a video titled Steven Universe, Worst Fandom Ever? With a bit of a clickbaity and provocative thumbnail on my old second channel, discussing the situation in which a lot of extremist, quote-unquote, social justice types within the Steven Universe fandom pushed a girl to potential suicide. Although there is much debate over whether or not she would have actually gone through with it, the fact that these people pushed her to the breaking point over a cartoon is just plain ridiculous. I got quite a fair bit of criticism for the way I titled that video, but as my most viewed video on that channel before I removed it, the thing that I found most interesting was analyzing the comments, analyzing the feedback, the response. The majority of comments, assumably from younger viewers, were trying to turn it into a competition. I called it Steven Universe, Worst Fandom Ever? ? Commenters were posting comments like, the Undertale fandom is actually the worst, or the Sonic fandom is, or the Homestuck fandom is, or the FNAF fandom is actually the worst. To which I don't really consider any one fandom to be the worst. What is good and bad? These are merely subjective terms. The title of that video was merely to quote those who were calling the Steven Universe fandom the worst fandom, as the material I was debunking in the video was relevant to that simple premise. Every fandom has its extremists and its bad apples, so the ongoing debate I was seeing in the comments lost interest to me. That's not to say that there aren't aspects of some fandoms that can be described as problematic or outright cringy. That is just to say that I don't believe the concept of a fandom is inherently bad in and of itself, obviously. Sharing a love for a franchise through fanfiction, fan films, fan art, fan theories, music, remixes, parodies, reviews, analysis, animations, discussions, videos, meetups, cosplay. These are all beautiful things in their own right. However, a comment on that original video did catch my attention. In response to people who went out of their way to see things like Steven Universe is the worst fandom, Sonic, Undertale, My Little Pony, etc., I said, as I've said before, that fandoms are not inherently bad and that every fandom has toxic individuals within their group. They said in response that while every fandom has their share of bad apples, not all of them are bad in the same way, which I find myself actually agreeing with. For example, when you think Steven Universe fandom, you tend to think of someone with a sense of social justice, and thus the bad apples in that fandom will likely cross over with the extremists of what the internet dubs social justice warriors, or people who are on the far left politically. I try not to use the term social justice warriors myself, but when I do use it, I am not referring to the people who are actually trying to legitimately do good and advocate for equality between the genders, between all races. Simply, as I understand it, the term refers to the stereotypes of extremist individuals that subscribe to a social justice mindset but act hateful, condescending, and spiteful to anyone and everyone that they perceive to be privileged while lacking any form of self-awareness. The Humongous incident springs to mind as an example. People who adamantly believe that they are doing the right thing, but generally are being a nuisance, which is different to a toxic Sonic fan who might just indulge in some bizarre, furry fanfiction, or Rick and Morty fans who act like watching a television show somehow makes them smarter than the average person. Hopefully, people understand what I'm trying to say without me offending anyone that I didn't intend to offend. Simply put, the purposes of this video and any future video on this topic are to act as an analysis, a character study, or a criticism of people who specifically fit the description of what's being stated in the video. So to put it more bluntly, if your response to my criticism is, "But not all bronies are like that," then you are probably not the type of brony that I am referring to in the video in question. Even if you don't agree with that premise, you can at least see how you cannot just cast all toxic fans in every fandom into one overarching category, because they're not all the same in the same way. Just to reiterate one more time, this is not aimed at fans or fandoms as a whole, just the people who take their obsession with an intellectual property way too far, to the point of hurting themselves or causing problems for others. The reason that you have to reiterate this 1,000 times is because if you even imply that a certain fandom has bad people in it, you basically anger the fandom as a whole, and they start twisting your words to make it seem like you're attacking the thing that they love or their friends. If we lived in a world where the worst parts of fandom simply made bad fan art or cringeworthy cosplays for the internet to laugh at, honestly, that still wouldn't be good on either end, but it would be significantly better than the world that we currently occupy. To an extent, there is a good reason why some of these stereotypes exist. I mean, there is a section of Undertale fans that have pretty much agreed on the colour of Sans' bone. No, not that one. Now, for the unpersuaded who thinks that I'm just bullying for the sake of bullying, let us talk about a fandom that I'm sure everyone has heard of. Rick and Morty. I won't dwell on this point for too long, but in Season 3 of Rick and Morty, all they did was have the character Rick make a passing reference to a short-lived promotional McDonald's sauce, and fans in a real act of mob mentality demanded a comeback of the sauce in truckloads, and when they finally got what they wanted, it wasn't enough for them, and madness ensued. And no, I'm not referring to this guy right here, this guy was a troll. One more example from the Steven Universe fandom where people who should supposedly be on the same side, at least on paper, attacked each other. One person made a fan comic shipping the male character Greg with one of Pearl's crushes. The response to this accused the fan comic creator of being homophobic for taking a gay pairing and making them straight. But then that person got accused by the fanbase of erasing the experience and validity of bisexual people, and then those people got accused of not being real fans of the show. And honestly, how does one react to something like that? But that's just the issue with people who try to find a problem in even the smallest things. If you look hard enough, you can make something worth arguing about over anything. Another thing that toxic fans will do is send death threats, insults, condescending language to the creators and cast members of their favorite show for a variety of reasons. For not having the same political stance as them, for not confirming their headcanon, for not responding to their emails, or for disputing their fan theory. Honestly, it's all just a mess. Now let's talk about soul bonding and fandom cults, because yes, apparently they do exist. In fandom subculture, soul bonding has a variety of descriptions, but the one I'm looking at is typically seen as the belief that one has another soul living inside their body, sometimes described as a spiritual connection with a fictional character, or a mental link with that fictional character that they describe as being from another universe. They think that they are the real version of that character and will roleplay as them in day-to-day life. Another description that I found is having an imaginary friend that you can blame your poor life choices on. Again, this is one of those things that I view as potentially harmless, but can be taken way too far. If it's someone just role-playing and keeping to themselves, that's perfectly fine. Once they start forcing others, non-consenting people, to indulge them in their fantasy, that's when it starts to become a problem. An infamous story online, known as the Final Fantasy House, which down the rabbit hole covered far better than I ever could have, about a girl named Jennifer, who believed that she was a video game character and had either forced or convinced others to live out her fantasy with her. She had somehow convinced people to invest their time, money, their sanity, and their freedom to fulfill her whims. This cult mentality has allegedly been shifted to the Hannibal fandom, with the same girl believing herself to be a character from that show. This is a behavior that has been consistent since 2002 and continues to this day. I'll say one more time until you're tired of hearing it. There is nothing wrong with being a part of a fandom. I myself have been part of several fandoms in my lifetime, from the My Little Pony fandom, the Minecraft fandom, the Harry Potter fandom, Steven Universe, Buffy, Sonic the Hedgehog, Pokemon, and I've even dabbled in the Homestuck fandom for a little bit. So this isn't some pwned or exposed video on fandoms as a concept, or trying to demonize fandoms as a whole. This video is simply here to explore the depths of the dark and gritty, uncomfortable side of online fandoms which the average person tends not to actively seek out or talk about, unless they're masochists. There's no shame in it whatsoever in being a fan of something, to enjoy something to the point of creating fanworks, even if that fandom that you're a part of has a bad reputation online. But even the most innocent of you have likely witnessed the likes of fandom drama, doxing, lengthy angry rants, and people getting a little bit too possessive with their headcanons, lacking any and all self-awareness or social awareness. We're not just talking about children or teenagers either, we are talking about people who should know better. Adults that take this stuff a bit too seriously. The Steven Universe video I made a few years ago on my second channel with an admittedly provocative title went into an elaborate example on how one person deviating from the views of the rest of the general fandom created an uproar. And yes, there were definitely some butthurt Steven Universe fans in the comment section of that video too, who just didn't like the fact that I had anything negative to say to begin with. So going back to the question, which is the worst fandom? The answer? No one fandom can be considered the worst fandom, as every fandom has its fair share of toxic people that make everyone else look bad. This can apply to any group as well, not even just fandoms. Even people with political opinions will from time to time be overshadowed by the vocal extremists that align themselves with that group. Once again, I feel it is in my best interest to emphasize that I do not condone any witch hunting or bullying. And I hope that this video merely serves as an opinion piece and not as an excuse to someone else's crappy behavior. At the same time, know that I'm not defending the toxic people within fandoms, particularly the ones who use mental illness of all things as an excuse not to take responsibility for their actions.